It started with a box. Not the kind wrapped in satin ribbons or the kind you hide under your bed. This box was plain, grey, with fraying corners and a worn-out label that read, "Property of the Lost Words Society." Kara found it leaning against her door on the morning of her 29th birthday, along with a single note, no name, no return address, just 6 neatly printed words. He gave her a dictionary, and a ring. She laughed, thinking it was some odd gift from her best friend April, who was always trying to make birthdays poetic again. But when she opened the box, she found exactly what the note promised. A thick, leather-bound dictionary, ancient-looking, with gold-tipped pages, and, resting inside a carved-out hollow in the middle, a silver ring. No gemstones. Just a word engraved on the inside of the band. Respect. A word she'd never seen before. Kara was an editor for a small indie publishing house in Brooklyn. Words were her world. She knew every obscure term from Middle English to modern slang. But respect? She flipped through the dictionary. The pages weren't in alphabetical order. Some had been torn out. Others were handwritten. The margins were filled with notes in faded ink, equations, and foreign languages. Some she recognized, Latin, Sanskrit. Others she was certain didn't exist. Every few pages, she'd find a word underlined, starred, or circled. And there it was, eventually, on a yellowed page near the middle. Respect, N. The return of hope after a long absence. She paused, touched the ring again. This wasn't April's doing. This was something else. That night, she wore the ring. She didn't know why. She told herself it was just pretty, or maybe she liked the way respect felt in her mouth. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. The dream started immediately. In the first, she was standing in a vast library with no walls, just endless bookshelves that faded into fog. She followed the sound of whispering voices until she found a man sitting at a wooden desk, reading from the same dictionary she now kept on her nightstand. He looked up and smiled, not the eerie kind of smile you wake up from in a sweat, but something else. Like he knew her. "Do you remember yet?" he asked. She woke up before she could answer. Over the next few days, the dictionary began to change. Words she was sure weren't there before started appearing. Words that seemed to relate directly to her life, things she hadn't told anyone. Thoughts she buried. Memories she didn't even know she still had. One day, a page appeared titled, "How to Find the Person Who Gave You the Ring." It was formatted like a riddle, with lines that read, "When you've lost what's never been, seek the door in chapter 10. When silence starts to hum and sing, you'll find the one who gave the ring." Chapter 10. Of what? The dictionary had no chapters. She scoured her apartment, trying to make sense of it all. And that's when she noticed something strange. Her copy of the collected works of Emily Bronte had a torn page sticking out. She hadn't touched it in years. She opened it to find chapter 10 bookmarked with an old photograph. A black and white picture of a man standing under a lamppost in the rain. In the bottom corner, barely visible, were the initials, LW. She turned the photo over. On the back was a quote written in familiar handwriting. "The meanings you seek were never lost. Just hidden. Just waiting." Kara found herself obsessing. She stopped answering April's calls. She stopped showing up at work. Her world was narrowing, centering on the dictionary, the ring, and the man in her dreams who now visited her every night. Each dream, he told her a new word. Words that didn't exist in any dictionary but fit perfectly with the way she felt. Velour, the strange wistfulness of used bookstores. Klineman, the poetic tendency of things to turn away from their course. Sirene, the fine, silent rain that falls from a clear sky at dusk. And then, last night, he said, "You're almost ready." She reached out to touch him, and for the first time, her hand didn't pass through. But before she could speak, she awoke to find the dictionary open on her bed to a blank page, except for one new word at the top. Chapter 11. Kara stared at it. If there was a chapter 10, and now a chapter 11, then maybe this wasn't a dictionary at all. Maybe it was a story. Her story. And she had no idea how it would end. Not yet. Not until she found him. Not until she turned the next page. Kara didn't sleep the next night. Not because she wasn't tired, her body was heavy with exhaustion, but because she was afraid. Afraid that if she closed her eyes, she'd miss something. That the dream might not come again. Or worse, that it might. So instead, she sat cross-legged on the floor with the dictionary in her lap, the silver ring glowing faintly under the flickering light of a desk lamp. She watched the word Chapter 11 ink itself deeper into the page as if something was still writing it, unseen. She flipped the page. More blankness. And then, a faint shimmer, like the page was breathing. And then, in tiny handwritten print, a single line appeared near the bottom corner. Ink can be erased. Meaning can't. She whispered it aloud. Nothing happened. Then, the ring on her finger grew cold. Suddenly, sharply cold. And a new line etched itself across the paper, as though invisible fingers were pressing into the fibers. You must return a word to the world. She blinked. Return it. Another line appeared immediately beneath the first. One lost word. Spoken aloud. In the right place. She looked at the word engraved inside the ring again. Respire. Could that be it? By morning, she was out of the apartment for the first time in a week, dictionary wrapped in a scarf and stuffed in her tote bag, ring tight on her finger. She didn't know where she was going, only that her feet kept pulling her south, toward the old part of the city. Past the parks. Past the museums. Past where GPS lost its precision and everything began to feel older, like time wasn't quite linear here. Then she saw it. A used bookstore she swore wasn't there last month. No signage, just a small placard in the window. Words you forgot you needed. Inside, the air was thick with dust and something sweeter. Cedarwood. Maybe. Or memory. The store was empty. No clerk. No bell on the door. Just rows of leaning shelves and books stacked like towers, daring gravity to intervene. As she wandered in, the lights flickered. Somewhere in the back, a soft radio played something old, maybe a Sinatra song, warped like it was underwater. She turned a corner and found herself in a narrow aisle with a single armchair at the end, and resting on the seat, impossibly familiar. A second copy of the dictionary. She approached it slowly, her own copy still tucked under her arm. This one looked newer. Not worn, not yellowed. The cover was smooth. The title embossed in gold leaf. But when she opened it, she gasped. It was completely blank, except for a single phrase on the first page. Say it here. Her heart thudded. She looked down at the ring again. Respire. Her voice trembled as she spoke it aloud. Respire. The lights buzzed. Somewhere, a book slid from a shelf. And then, everything stopped. The music. The air. Even the dust in the sunlight. Frozen. And in that moment, the pages of the second dictionary began to fill. Rapidly. Words she didn't know. Words she hadn't seen in any language. Lines of definitions, diagrams, footnotes, annotations in dozens of hands. Then the final page turned itself, and one word, just one, etched itself across the bottom. Now, Chapter 12 begins. She looked up, and the bookstore had changed. The shelves were gone. The light was different. Brighter. Like dawn. And standing just 10 feet away, leaning casually against what used to be the back wall, was him. The man from her dreams. He looked exactly the same. Tall. Dark hair. That quiet smile. Only this time, he looked real. He gave her a slow nod, as if he'd been waiting for her to find the way back. Kara, he said, softly. Welcome back. She didn't know how to speak. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. How? She started. Who are you? He stepped forward. I told you once. You just forgot. He extended his hand. She didn't take it. Not yet. Tell me, then. He nodded. I'm the one who gave you the ring. Kara's eyes flicked down to it. You mean, you gave me the dictionary? No. That came from something older. I only gave you one word. He smiled. The one you just spoke. Respire. Hope returning after a long absence. She swallowed. Her throat was dry. Why? Because I knew you were the one who could bring the rest of them back. The rest of what? He turned, walking toward the wall, which rippled like fabric in the wind, and passed through it. And then, he was gone. Except the dictionary in her arms was glowing faintly again. And the page it had turned to now read. Chapter 12. The Archive of Forgotten Tongues. Every word you restore brings you closer. Follow the echo. Listen to the silence. He is waiting. But so is something else. Kara exhaled, stepped toward the wall, and felt it pull her. She didn't resist. She didn't look back. The world on the other side of the wall wasn't a world at all. It was sound. At first, nothing made sense, just a wash of whispers, echoes, and fragments of sentences that brushed past her like invisible moths. The air shimmered, and every time she moved, she left behind a faint trail of syllables, as though even her footsteps were made of language. Kara stood still, clutching the dictionary tightly to her chest. The ring on her finger pulsed like a heartbeat, sinking with something beneath her feet. The ground was translucent, like thick glass stretched across a great abyss. Below, she saw floating letters, whole paragraphs drifting in and out of view. Some in alphabet she didn't recognize, others blinking as though they didn't want to be seen. Above her, a vast sky of parchment scrolled slowly, ink dripping like rain but vanishing before it could touch anything. And then she heard the voice again. His voice. But this time, it didn't come from inside her head, or from the air around her. It came from beneath. She dropped to her knees and pressed her hand to the glass floor. Kara. The name reverberated under her palm. Keep going. A narrow bridge unfurled ahead of her, like the archive itself had decided she was ready for the next step. It was formed from lines of text, words overlapping and weaving into something solid. She took a deep breath and stepped onto it. Every footstep triggered a ripple. With each ripple, a word floated up from below and hovered around her for a moment before dissolving. She caught a few. Apricity, the warmth of the sun in winter. Redomancy, the act of loving in return. Skrik, a single scream in the dark that no one hears. These words, they were emotions. Experiences. Lives. The archive wasn't just a library. It was memory. Halfway across the bridge, the world flickered. The bridge behind her evaporated into 1,000 vowels. She kept walking. And then, she wasn't alone. Someone stood at the far end of the bridge. Not him. A woman. Tall. Dressed in robes that seemed stitched from old newspaper and braided notes, her eyes black as punctuation marks. She held a staff topped with a quill that wrote in the air as she moved. You're the first in a long time, the woman said. Her voice was paper-tearing. First what? To remember. Kara tightened her grip on the dictionary. Who are you? I am the guardian of Chapter 12, the woman replied. And I'm here to test your tongue. Kara felt her throat tighten. The guardian raised her hand, and the sky above stilled. You carry the ring, the guardian said. You open the book. You remembered Resper. But to move forward, you must speak a word that does not exist. Kara blinked. How can I say something that doesn't exist? The guardian smiled faintly. Because it does. You just haven't heard it yet. The bridge beneath her dimmed. And then, a silence deeper than silence descended. It wasn't quiet. It was absence. A stillness so perfect that even her thoughts sounded loud. And in that vacuum, Kara heard it, something buried deep inside her. Not a memory. Not quite. More like a word her soul had been trying to say since she was born. She closed her eyes and let it rise. It felt warm. Sharp. Familiar. A word she somehow knew, but couldn't explain. Then she opened her mouth, and let it go. Leraith. The air snapped like a broken wire. The bridge cracked, but didn't collapse. The guardian stared, stunned. You named it, she whispered. You brought back a word that was lost before language even began. Kara staggered slightly, her chest heaving. The ring on her finger was glowing so brightly now it burned. What does it mean? She asked. The guardian stepped back and bowed. You tell us. Kara hesitated. The word swirled in her mind. Leraith, she said slowly, tasting it again. It's the ache for a home that never existed. The yearning for a life that was always almost yours, but never could be. The moment she said it, the archive trembled. Thousands of pages fluttered in response. The world remembered. The bridge reformed itself into a staircase now, descending into the depths. The guardian gestured toward it. Chapter 13 is waiting. What's in it? Kara asked. The guardian's answer came like a riddle. The name you forgot. The truth behind the ring. And the one who's been writing your story. Kara turned toward the staircase. The dictionary in her arms had opened again. New ink was forming. Chapter 13. The author's name. The staircase was not built for feet. Its steps were made of unfolding sentences, each one forming just before Kara's foot could land, as if the archive itself was reading her intent and writing the path in real time. With every step she took, the dictionary's pages fluttered like wings at her side. Somewhere behind her, the guardian of Chapter 12 watched in silence. But ahead, downward into the shifting silence, Kara could feel something calling her.
Not him. Not yet.
Something deeper.
Older. The author.
When she reached the bottom of the staircase, there was no floor, only a wide, circular room suspended in a starless void.
The walls were lined with mirrors.
Each one reflected a different version of her.
In one, she was older.
In another, younger. In some, her eyes were not her own.
And in the center of the room, a writing desk. It was ancient, gnarled, covered in ink stains and burns.
A pen rested atop it, quivering ever so slightly, as if it wanted to move but hadn't been given permission yet. Above the desk, words floated in the air, scattered, out of order.
Name. Rewrite. Truth. Ring. Memory. End. Begin. Unwrite. Return. Kara approached slowly. The pen rose.
Then, it wrote a single sentence in the air. To name the author is to awaken them.
She stared at it.
What does that mean? The pen hesitated, then wrote again. You already know their name. You just don't remember that it's yours.
Kara's breath caught. She looked at the desk.
And saw, for the first time, the name carved into the wood grain.
C.L. Wren.
Her own initials. And next to them, another set, L.W.
Her pulse quickened. She remembered the photograph now, the man under the lamppost. The initials scribbled in the corner. L.W. Who is he? She whispered aloud.
Why do I know him? The pen trembled again, then scrawled across the air.
Because he wrote the first draft.
But you were meant to write the final one.
The mirrors began to shift.
In one, she saw herself sitting at the desk.
In another, she was erasing something.
In a third, she was handing the ring to someone else, someone with no face.
Then all the mirrors went dark. A hum filled the air. Low, resonant, familiar.
The void around her began to contract, curling in on itself like a book closing. And then, from the shadows behind the desk, a door appeared.
Wooden, narrow, slightly ajar. The pen fell flat. The sentence in the air faded.
The only thing left was the ring on her finger, now pulsing rapidly, urgently.
Kara moved to the door and pushed it open.
The light on the other side wasn't blinding.
It was soft, like the edge of morning.
She stepped through and found herself not in a room, not in a dream, but in a place that felt unfinished.
A field without wind. A sky without clouds.
A single tree in the distance, with books hanging from its branches instead of leaves.
And leaning against that tree, him. The man.
The one from her dreams.
From the bookstore. From the story that kept writing itself. He looked up as she approached. Smiled again.
This time, Kara didn't hesitate.
You, she said.
I need to know your name.
He tilted his head.
You already know it. Say it.
He stepped forward. Lior. It hit her like a heartbeat skipping. L.W. Lior Wren.
You are the one who started the story, she said.
He nodded. And you are the one who ended it.
Or were supposed to.
She narrowed her eyes.
What do you mean? You left.
You forgot.
The words faded. The world cracked. Kara took a shaky breath.
Why would I do that?
Lior stepped closer, placing his hand over hers. Because you were afraid of remembering how it ended.
He reached into his pocket, pulled out a second ring. Just like hers. Same silver band.
Same engraving. Only this one read.
Unword.
The ground beneath them trembled. The books in the tree began to open on their own, pages fluttering violently.
Kara looked at the new ring.
What does it mean?
Lior's eyes softened.
It's the word you erased. The one that broke everything.
Her hands shook.
Why would I erase a word? Because it was a name.
She looked up at him.
My name.
No, he said gently.
Mine.
The sky began to darken.
The tree started to shed its books like dying leaves. And the dictionary in Kara's arms flipped wildly to a blank page. A sentence began to scroll itself across it. To remember what was unwritten, you must speak the word aloud once more.
Kara stared at the ring in Lior's hand. Unword. She took it. Her heart thundered.
Then she closed her eyes, pressed the ring against her palm, and whispered, Lior. The moment she said his name, the world blinked.
Not faded. Not trembled. It blinked.
Like something ancient and conscious had finally turned its gaze back to her.
Kara opened her eyes.
The tree was no longer shedding books, it had vanished entirely. The sky wasn't sky anymore. It was parchment, stretching endlessly in every direction, words appearing and disappearing in bursts of living ink.
And Leo was still standing there, but not as she remembered.
His edges shimmered now, less like a man and more like the outline of one, like a figure drawn in graphite, halfway erased.
He looked at her with a strange sorrow. "You shouldn't have remembered me," he said quietly. "I had to," she replied.
"You said I wrote the ending."
He smiled faintly. "Yes. And then you tore it out."
She tried to steady her breathing, but everything around her was shifting. Her body felt heavier now, like remembering was anchoring her too deeply to something she couldn't yet see. "What was the word I erased?" she asked. Leo stepped forward and took her hand. "You didn't erase a word."
His voice was like the echo of a melody she'd once known by heart.
"You erased a world." The parchment sky rippled again, and behind them, another structure began to rise, a tower made entirely of letters, rotating slowly, its base rooted in the past and its tip piercing whatever future might exist. Kara's dictionary began to vibrate.
It opened again on its own. Chapter 14 had fully formed now. Chapter 14.
The word that was erased.
To unwrite is not to forget. It is to protect.
And protection always has a cost. The letters surrounding them began to hum, a low harmonic thrum that resonated in her bones. Then a new sentence appeared in midair, in her own handwriting. "I had to choose between love and the world I built."
Kara's knees weakened.
She remembered. The world that had existed before the dictionary.
Before the ring. Before the forgetting.
A place where language shaped reality.
Where those who could name things could control them.
Where she and Leo had written realms into being, entire landscapes born from syllables, from verbs carved into mountains and adjectives whispered into rivers.
They had built it together. And she had chosen to let it fall. To protect him.
"I remember," she said softly, her throat tightening. Leo looked at her, clearer now, more solid. "You rewrote me into someone else," he said.
"So they couldn't take me. You fractured the lexicon. Hid the archive.
Burned the last word that held me in place."
Kara nodded slowly.
"The unword."
He met her eyes.
"And now, you've spoken it again."
The tower behind them surged with light.
Words began to rain from the sky. Actual words, glowing, falling, dissolving as they touched the ground.
It wasn't chaotic.
It was grief.
The world was weeping for what had been buried.
And then, from the base of the tower, a shadow rose.
Not a person. A gap.
A thing made entirely of absence, like someone had torn a hole out of existence and forgot to patch it.
Leo stepped between it and Kara. "No," he said firmly. "You don't get her. Not again."
The shadow paused, then pulsed, sending a shockwave that blew open every page of the dictionary Kara still held. Words flew.
Pages tore. Leo stumbled.
Kara screamed, running to him, but he held up a hand. "You have to finish the story, Kara. I don't even remember how it ends. Then write a new one."
The dictionary flipped open one final time.
And for the first time, the next chapter wasn't written in it.
Only a question. Who holds the pen now?
Kara turned to the tower of letters.
The very top had formed into a platform.
And above it, hovering in stillness, was a pen made of light and silence.
It glowed with the color of forgotten hope.
The shape of every possibility that had never been born.
She looked back at Leo.
"You'll be erased again if I write it wrong," she said.
He smiled sadly.
"Or you'll write me incompletely." Then he placed something in her hand. The second ring.
The unword. "Take it," he said.
"Write me. Write us. Write the world we lost." Kara closed her eyes, pressed both rings together in her palms, and let the words rise. The platform began to lower, bringing the pen toward her. And from somewhere deep in her memory, a first line surfaced. In the beginning, there was no word, only the silence between two hearts.
She took the pen. The dictionary opened to its final blank page. And as the shadow began to descend, she began to write.
Kara stood beneath the tower of letters, the glowing pen trembling between her fingers. The two rings, Respair and Unword, rested in her left palm, warm and weighty with meaning. The shadow, the gap, the consequence of forgetting, hovered in the distance.
It was hungry.
Not for destruction, but for erasure. It did not want to hurt, only to unmake.
and she was the only one who could stop it. But she had no idea what the next line should be.
Behind her, Lior was beginning to fade again. The moment she had remembered him, she had rewritten their connection.
That meant everything was in flux. The archive, the dictionary, her own memory, even her reality.
If she wrote the wrong story now, he would be gone for good. Not forgotten,
but never written at all.
And yet, somewhere in her heart, she knew this wasn't about saving the past anymore.
It was about writing a better ending. The pen began to pulse with light.
Kara looked down at the blank page in the dictionary, its final page.
No title.
No instructions.
Only space. She thought of everything. The dream library. The bookstore. The guardian. The staircase made of words. The tree with its pages.
She thought of her own name, C.L. Wren. A name she had used to write Forgotten Worlds before she forgot she was an author at all.
She thought of Lior. Not just his face,
but the way he had never forced her to remember. The way he had waited. The way he always smiled with sadness, like he already knew how her story might end.
She thought of the word he'd given her first.
Respair. Hope returning after a long absence.
And then she smiled.
She pressed the two rings together, hard, until they fused into one in a silent burst of silver light, engraving both words on the inside.
Respair. Unword. Hope returned. Fear undone.
Kara held the fused ring high in the air and spoke aloud. This time, the story will remember us both. The pen ignited in her hand like a flame. The shadow screamed, not in anger, but in release, and began to collapse into language. Words poured from its void body in reverse. Sorrow, silence, solitude, endings, fear, forgetting, loss.
And she caught them. Every one. She turned back to the final page and began to write.
Once upon a wordless world, a writer forgot she had the power to remember. But the one who loved her waited, not to be rescued, but to remind her what love was made of, not permanence, but presence, not memory, but meaning.
The world around her stopped shaking.
The parchment sky unfolded into blue.
Real, soft blue.
The ground beneath her turned into stone, warm from a sun that had just returned. The tower of letters folded inward and scattered like dandelion seeds.
And the tree returned.
Only this time, it bloomed.
Kara turned back to Lior. He wasn't fading anymore. He was real again. Solid. Still smiling.
I remember now, she whispered, running to him.
He caught her in his arms and laughed.
You rewrote me well. I didn't just rewrite you, she said, looking up at him. I rewrote us.
The dictionary in her hand had closed itself.
The cover no longer read the Lost Words Society. It had a new title, embossed in soft silver script. The Word That Found Its Way Back.
By C.L. Wren and Lior Wren.
She slipped the fused ring onto her finger, and Lior pulled a matching one from his pocket.
Respair. Unword. Hope. Release.
The return of what was once lost, not as it was, but better. They stayed there beneath the blooming tree for a long time, the two of them,
not afraid of forgetting anymore, because the story was finished, and the story would remember.